So I thought I would tell you guys the story of the 3 tests that I failed. Everybody's failing tests lately. I have family members who failed tests. I have people who I work with who are failing tests, and I failed a test recently. So it just seems like it's that time of the year when people are failing tests. So I figured I'd tell stories about the test. It's uncommon that I fail a test. Very uncommon. But I have failed tests before. And so I'll tell the test that I failed. First test I failed was chemistry 2. Okay, so they're difficult classes when you first get to college. They're some of the weed out classes, so they can be intense, and they can also be sticklers about like detail. So if you don't get one thing right, it's almost like math, where you can get, actually a lot of it is math. So if there's sticklers, you can get easily like knocked off a whole bunch of points. Except, okay, so here's how I failed chemistry 2, the final. I failed the chemistry 2 final, which is odd because the entire semester, okay, and I'm good at chemistry. Okay, so the entire semester, the class was organized as 5 tests. Okay, 5 tests. Test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4, and then a final. Okay, and the scores that I got on test 1 were, I literally remember the scores. Okay, I got a 100%, a 95, a 100%, and a 95. So I did really, really well for the 4 tests throughout the whole semester. So when I went into that final season, like in college, you know, sometimes if you have a high class load, sometimes you have to just like, you have to pick and choose your battles. You have to strategically plan for your time. Like, okay, like what are you going to study, or what are you going to put the most time in, right? To get good grades. So I was like, okay, well, like I got 195, 195. Like, I do not need to study for this final at all. And I even calculated it out. I literally went through the mathematical calculation. Nowadays on Canvas, you can just like type in like, what if I got this score? What would my grade be? In the old days, like you didn't have that. You had to like actually like calculate it out. So I hand calculated it out. Okay, like what's the lowest score I could get on this test and still get an A? And it was a 50%. If I got literally anything above 50%, I would get an A in the class. So I was like, I can literally fail this test and I can still get an A. So I was like, I'm not going to study for it at all. I'm going to focus all my attention on other stuff. I'm not going to study for it at all. So I didn't study for it. And I went to the test and I bombed the test, okay? Completely bombed it, got less than 50%, and I got a fucking B+. That was that was literally my only B in science classes. That was my only B on my entire transcript in college, was that fucking chemistry 2. And I failed the test, and I felt like that's such bullshit because I got A's throughout the whole class, and it was just that final test that screwed me. That's what happens when you don't study at all. That's what happens. That was the first test I failed. Okay. Second, so that was just like I knew the material, I knew I could know the material, but it just, I didn't study and it wasn't like fresh in my mind. So that was kind of like an odd fail. The next class I failed, or the not class I failed, but test I failed, was organic chemistry 1. Okay, so organic chemistries can get really difficult, and it's actually kind of a fun class. Like I did enjoy those classes because it was kind of like a creative thing where a lot of the test questions are focused on like synthesize. You have to synthesize this, and you have to know like a string of like reactions that you can string together to get a final product. So it's actually kind of fun. But if you have not had it before, or if you've never been introduced to the idea, or you don't know anybody who's had the class before, which was me, I'm super introverted. I don't go out of my way to make friends with people. I don't go out of my way to like strategize or talk to other people. I like to do everything by myself. So like I did not talk to anybody about this class, literally just registered for it and started taking the class. Okay. So I had no idea what to expect. Right. And all my experience before was like, oh, I'll be fine. Right. Because I do fine at everything. So I'll be fine for this. So we get to the first test. Okay. And I go into the test And this was like shocking for me. This was like so scary for me. I got the test and I started flipping through the pages, reading the questions, and realizing every single question, I had no idea how to even like approach answering the question. I had no idea how to like even approach, like, okay, what should I do here? Like, what should even be my thought process on any of the questions on any of the pages, okay? So I flipped through the whole test. I think I ended up with like, I got probably like a 30 on that test, 30 out of 100. So I literally bombed that. That was like the worst test I've ever failed. That's the worst I've ever done on a test. And fortunately, like, there's a couple things I learned from that class. One is I learned how to study, right? Like, that was the first class where I like really had hard content. And the teacher was a really good teacher. It wasn't the teacher's problem. It was just that what he was expecting on the test was far beyond the time that he could communicate the information in the lecture. Okay, so if you just went to all the lectures, like, you're not going to get the information. That's how I approach it before. I just go to the lectures and I just remember everything that they say, and it gets put on the test, then I get it. This wasn't like that. This is like, okay, you go to the lectures, you get like maybe like 10% of what you're expected to know in the class, and you have to spend the rest of the time sort of like independent learning, doing problems, to get that rest of that knowledge. So that was the first time I learned like how to like hardcore study. So after I failed that test, I completely like changed my strategy for studying for that class. I got like a giant practice book, and I literally just started like doing hours every night, practice problems on organic chemistry. And I ended up with an A in that class. Fortunately, I also learned something sort of teaching during that class. I'm sure the professor like had this experience many times before where people fail the first test. So he had a policy where amongst all the tests, he would drop one and he would replace your lowest test score with your highest test score at the end of the semester. So you could drop one test which didn't count, which essentially is that's what I do in all my classes now. I think that's like the most fair policy because it allows failure. It doesn't punish failure as long as you do the steps to like study it, improve, and know the material in the future. So anyway, that's the second test that I failed. Okay, the third test that I failed. I've only failed 3 tests in my life. The third test that I failed was literally just now. So every semester I take one class. I'm a second degree undergraduate in computer science. I started this when I first got hired as a professor. This is funny. My rationale for doing this was, okay, so when they hire you as an assistant professor, you're essentially like, you're hired on probation, and they essentially like hire you, and 5 years later you have like this tenure meeting, right? And at that point, they either decide, okay, get rid of this person completely, or give them tenure. So my thought, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know how I feel about the process of sort of like being hired on probation. It's not, I don't think it's like a positive thing. But anyway, my thought process was, okay, well, if they're going to hire me under this like sort of like gunpoint, they're going to hire me and tell me like, you better prove yourself or we're going to fire you. If that was their philosophy, okay, my philosophy was, okay, well, I need to start setting up some hedge bets then. Like, in case they fire me, like, I need to have like a hedge, okay? So as an assistant professor, we get one free class every semester as part of our like employee benefits. Anybody who's an employee at our school, you get one free class per semester. So I was like, I calculated it out, and I was like, okay, if I take one class every semester, by the time I go up for tenure, I could pretty much have like an entire new degree. So if they ever fired me, I'd pretty much be like, well, whatever, like, I don't care, because now I have a third degree, and I'm probably going to make even more money with this third degree in the context of all my other degrees. So like, whatever, fire me if you want, but I'll just be happier in the end anyway. So that was kind of like my hedge. So I was like, okay, I'll register for computer science. I'll take one class every semester. I can handle that. Which some classes have been extremely difficult. Some classes have not been. Anyway, so this semester I'm taking, in part of that degree program, I'm taking digital logic circuits, which is actually an electrical engineering class. It's the only like electrical engineering class I've ever taken. And like, it's the strangest class because, it's essentially like the material is, okay, how do computers like understand data in the zeros and ones? Like, how do you communicate with computers in binary, in zeros and ones? And sorry, I'm like burping. So it's like a really like odd class in a sense. It's very abstract. The math is very abstract. Like it's part of it is math based, and the math is very strange because it's like it's really really weird. You have to use different based numbers. So like you're not using decimal base 10. You're using either octal base numbers or hexadecimal numbers or binary numbers to do these strange math problems. So the arithmetic is really weird. And then you complex it with all these like coding things for like the computer. And then you complex it with like Boolean algebra. And it like the Boolean algebra logic is just like really strange. So anyway, it's like this class has been like material for me from like Mars. Like I've never encountered anything like this material before. It's like completely new to me. Almost like organic chemistry was the first time I had it. Now I think I'm starting to get like a grip on it. But anyway, the first test, again, it was the same. It was kind of like the same deal. Whereas like, I had gone to all the lectures. I had done all the practice problems that were assigned in the homework, and I didn't do great on the homework, but I felt like I had like a grip of the knowledge. Like I felt like I understood it pretty well. And I knew kind of like how to attack problems. So I felt like I was okay. And I think I actually calculate how many hours I study for each test. I studied about 4 hours for this test, which is, that's not a heavy load. That's usually what I'm doing in like easy classes, about 4 hours a test. So anyway, I get into the test. I got probably about half the points. I ended up with a 45 out of 100, completely failed the test. Fortunately, the professor has curved the test, and I don't say anything like I don't like in this context, like I would never contact the professor and be like, oh, like whatever, blah 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 blah. I was actually kind of embarrassed. I was just like, okay, like I clearly like I have to do better on the next one because I'm not like representing myself very well here, failing tests. Anyway, yeah, so I failed that test. I'm gonna double down on my studying time. I'll do better next time. I know the material now. Yeah, so those are the 3 tests that I failed. One recently, so if you failed a test recently, it's not that big of a deal. You know that people fail them. A couple of things that I would say in the end here. So like now, like when I was an undergraduate, I was super uncomfortable with failure. And I think that was probably a good thing. Like I would spend just hours and hours and hours studying, because and double checking and triple checking answers. And if it was a mathematics problem, I would double triple check to the decimal, make sure everything's correct. I remember staying up so late, like doing entire homework sets twice to make sure that I got the same answer twice, and then like triple checking everything and turning it in to make sure that I got like 100%. And I think that was valuable because I ended up graduating summa cum laude, getting like really good grades, and I do think that helped my career. But now like I'm just in a completely different place in my life. And also my philosophy is completely different. Like nowadays, like I'm not afraid of failure, because literally like my job is to fail. So literally like my job in the lab is to figure out novel ways to fail so that I know like, okay, trying this won't work, trying X won't work, trying Y won't work, trying Z won't work, but maybe trying W will work, and then maybe you'll get a final answer. So I literally like go to work. That's like my job, to fail every day. So I'm a lot more comfortable with failure. I understand kind of like the role of failure in progression. You have to fail to push yourself to your limits. You have to fail to push yourself to new heights. So I have a lot of a different philosophy now, and my philosophy of failure is almost failure is kind of like a positive thing, as long as you take it and you and you use it for what it's worth. Hang on, I'm adjusting this like TV because it's actually like useful as like a backlight. But it's not working well because it like cut out. Anyway, I'm more confident now in failure. You have to fail to succeed. Oh. I definitely don't want this on right now. Okay, so that's my spiel. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid if you fail the test. What you need to do is double down, study harder, learn the material, figure out what you did wrong, do better next time, stay confident, and you'll be fine. So that's my advice. I think I'm going to post a video eventually on like study habits because I just have so much built up knowledge on like good tactics for studying because again, like my undergraduate was so intense that like I really like hammered it and I got really good habits and now I know exactly like what to do. So I think I'm going to do another video on like good study habits, how to study. So if you guys have so I actually think that's like a learned skill that you need to learn. So if you're in that situation, hopefully in the future, maybe I'll put that video out and that would be helpful. If any of this content is useful for you, hit subscribe on the YouTube. I've been putting out a lot of content lately, so hit the subscribe. Also, my numbers just hit 150 subscribers. So thank you to everybody who has subscribed. Cheers. Have a good night.